This is a special episode. Through my research on this film, I found that I was very moved by the lead character played by Michael B. Jordan, Bryan Stevenson. Just the work that he has done in his life, that he's dedicated his life to, the amount of results that he has seen, the solution-based approaches that he has taken towards very complicated issues have really motivated me. And I feel that this episode needs less of my voice and more of the film, more of Bryan Stevenson. So without further ado, here is Just Mercy.
His name is Walter McMillan, known to his friends as Johnny D, and he's been on death row in Alabama's Holman prison for almost 6 years. Was he, in fact, the man who walked into a dry cleaning store in Monroeville, Alabama in November of 1986 and robbed and murdered the clerk? Or did they get the wrong man? And is the real murderer still out there somewhere? A jury was convinced they got the right man, but you may not be after you watch this story.
And I'm gonna do everything possible to keep them from taking it. You don't know what you're into down here in Alabama when you're guilty from the moment you're born.
God.
Mr. McMillan.
We done here.
Mr. McMillan, please.
We are a unique people on this soil. We came here under singular circumstances. No other group was forced to come here in chains in the bowels of a ship. No other group was completely severed from their homeland, from their families, from their languages, from their culture, from their religion. But as sociologist Glenn Bracey wrote, out of the ashes of white denigration, we gave birth to ourselves. Those who were enslaved, who were treated not as human beings but as property, created ourselves a new culture here. Isolated both from our native lands and forcibly segregated from both mainstream white culture and from our home, we created what became really the only truly unique American culture that exists. You could say that those who were considered the least American have actually turned out to be the most.
Well, we haven't done in this country what other countries have done, which is to try to engage in a reckoning, in a truth and reconciliation process. In South Africa, outside of their constitutional court, there are symbols and emblems designed to make sure that no one forgets the injustice of apartheid. But in this country, we haven't talked about slavery, we haven't talked about the native genocide, we don't talk about lynching, we haven't created the kind of memorialization symbols that are designed to make sure we are truthful and honest about this history. You start talking about race and people get nervous. And that has to change, and that's why I'm hoping that we will have an era of truth and justice in this country. And we shouldn't fear it, because I just think there's something better waiting for us in America. I do. In 1972, we had 300,000 people in jails and prisons. Today, we have 2.3 million people in jails and prisons. There are 6 million people on probation and parole in this nation. There are 70 million Americans with criminal arrests, which means that when they apply for a job or try to get a loan, they're going to be disfavored. We've done some really dreadful things to women. The percentage of women going to prison has increased 640% in the last 20 years. 70% of these women are single parents with minor children. And when they go to jails or prisons, their children get displaced. You're dramatically more likely to end up in jails and prisons if you're the child of an incarcerated parent. Today in the state of Alabama, 31% of the black male population has permanently lost the right to vote as a result of a criminal conviction. In 10 states, you permanently lose your rights to vote. Our jails and prisons are filled with people who are suffering from mental illness. About 50% of the people in prison have mental illness. 20% are acutely mentally ill. We have the highest rate of incarceration in the world, and we don't seem particularly ashamed of it. These problems are bad. But the statistic that I tell you really keeps me up late at night is the one from the Bureau of Justice that now predicts that 1 in 3 black male babies born in this country is expected to go to jail or prison. 1 in 3. That was not true in the 20th century. That was not true in the 19th century. It's become true in the 21st century, and there is this appalling silence. There is this indifference to this phenomenon. And it bothers me because I see in poor and minority communities hope being crushed. So I want to talk tonight about solutions. I believe we have to change this nation. I think we can create more justice in this country. But there are some things that all of us have to do if we really want to be about advancing justice. The first is, I don't think we can create more justice in America, in California, at Stanford, until we choose to get proximate to the problems that most motivate us, that most worry us. There is a need to get closer to the problems that we see. I believe that without getting proximate, you don't come up with the right solutions. We have too many policymakers trying to make solutions to problems from a distance. And when you problem solve from a distance, you get it wrong. You don't come up with the right solutions because you don't understand the details of the problems. When you get proximate, you hear things that you don't hear from a distance. You see things you don't see from a distance.
But he's still the daddy of my kids. And I really don't know what I'm supposed to tell them about staying out of trouble when you can be in your own house, minding your own business, surrounded by your entire family, and they still go and put some murder on you.
It's not just that. We feel like they put us all on death row too.
I can only imagine the pain that you're going through. But I'm gonna do everything I can.
The last lawyers was talking just as big as you. Then they took all our money and split. Why you different?
Well, our organization will cover all legal fees, so none of you will ever have to pay a penny. Now it's clear to me that this trial was constructed with lies. And based off everything that I've seen, I think we could build a case strong enough to bring Johnny D home. And I'm not gonna stop until I've done that.
You seem like good people to me. But Johnny D's the one you're gonna have to convince.
The second thing I believe we have to do if we really want to create more justice is that we have to change the narratives that sustain inequality and injustice.
Walter McMillan.
And none of that matter when all y'all think is I look like a man who could kill somebody. But that's not what I think.
When the world hears quintessential American music, it is our voice that they hear. When they see the unique style and the avant-garde flair of Black Americans, this came from enslaved people's determination to exert our individuality in a system of chattel slavery that tried to take every sense of our humanity. When people snicker at Black naming practices, those naming practices of our most marginalized who refuse to take the European names of the people who owned us, but also to take the names of an African continent from which we've never visited, but to create our own, this is an act of resistance. It is not something for us to deride. The things that we have most maligned about Black people have actually been signs of our resilience and our determination to thrive under the most brutal circumstances. That Black people are very inconvenient to this country's narrative. In order to justify slavery and our original sin and the fact that we were not an exceptional nation, but one of many slave nations, we had to say that Black people were the problem. And we have spent 400 years studying the way that Black people are the problem. I would like to offer tonight in this 400th year, we need to stop thinking of Black people as the problem and start seeing us as a solution.
Third thing, it's not enough to get proximate and change narratives. We cannot create the justice that we want unless we protect our hope. And I'm really, really convinced of this one. I am persuaded that hopelessness is the enemy of justice. Injustice prevails where hopelessness persists. And when you find yourself beginning to think that you cannot make a difference, when you begin to accept that these are problems too big for us to confront, to change, to challenge, you are going to contribute to the problem of injustice. Your hope is essential. You've got to protect your hopefulness. You do.
What's wrong with our criminal justice system is the fact that people want to come back sometime and second-guess juries. I don't believe there's been any law enforcement misconduct in this case. I don't think anyone's proved it.
The prosecutor's job is not to obtain a conviction, it's to achieve justice. And one of the greatest tragedies about this case is that somebody in Monroe County has literally gotten away with murder.
If an execution date is set for McMillan, and that day comes and it's time for him to go to the electric chair, will you be comfortable?
Yes. I'll be comfortable with it.
Do you think it's fair, just? He had his
day in court. He was tried by a jury, and they heard the testimony, and they believed it.
McMillan's fate is now in the hands of the Alabama Supreme Court, which is expected to decide soon if he's entitled to a new trial.
But these last few days, I can't stop thinking about Miles up there, telling everybody how it went down. That's the first time I feel like myself since I've been locked up. First time I remember who he is. These fools gonna do what they gonna do. But if they take me to that chair tonight, I'm going out smiling. 'Cause I got my truth back. You gave that to me. To be my family. And ain't nobody gonna take that from us. You ain't quitting, is you? No, sir.
Fourth thing, final thing, and I wish I could stop at 3, but I can't. The fourth thing that I have to tell you is that we cannot create justice. We cannot change the world by just getting proximate, by just changing narratives, by just staying hopeful. The fourth thing we've got to do is that we've got to be willing to do uncomfortable things. I've read and I've studied. I've never found oppression end. I've never found justice triumph. I've never found a situation where equality prevailed when people only did what's comfortable and convenient. If you're going to change the world, you're going to have to do some things that are uncomfortable.
What inspired each of you to want to take this particular project on?
Nobody's perfect, but he's close. He's really, really much better person than I am. You know, and he's really beating the drum for justice nonstop. He's dedicated his life to it.
Walter McMillan, the character that you play.
Most important movie I've ever done.
Really?
You know why?
The most important?
Yes, it is.
They need to remind you of your resume or the work you've done?
When we're talking about importance, I'm talking about the importance of the message. And when you go on your social media and you're able to see a young black man being killed by a police officer, because it allows us to address those types of symptoms in an artistic way. Here's Walter McMillan, in a sense, a person wrongly convicted of a crime that a city he never been in, a person he never met, and all of a sudden he sits on death row.
Before his trial.
Before his trial. The worst thing you can give a death row inmate is hope. And all of a sudden, hope walks in the form of Bryan Stevenson.
Rich boy from Harvard, you don't know what it is down here when you're guilty from the moment you're born.
So when you say guilty from the moment you're born.
Yeah, because I grew up in Texas. I was 8 years old and I got called by a grown man. How is me being born, how can I receive all of this hate?
When Jamie plays Walter, I think he exposes the agony of being wrongly convicted and the trauma.
Stevenson and his organization, the Equal Justice Initiative, have dedicated themselves to changing the criminal justice system.
I think if we can create a consciousness that bias and bigotry is fundamentally unacceptable in this country, we'll think differently. It won't take 6 years to get Walter McMillan off of death row. It won't take 30 years to get Anthony Wynn Hinton off of death row.
That man caused a lot of pain. A lot of pain for folks around here. And if you go digging in those wounds, you're gonna be making a lot of people very unhappy.
Well, it isn't my job to make people happy. It's to achieve justice for my client.
Disagree? Comment down below. Don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to Image Matters for more film and television breakdowns. Stay beautiful.